like Dexter, when if I'm doing like I don't know, like Jana Shasana or something like that, he just comes in and he always seems to know quite how far up my leg to sit, to just give me this really gentle like assist without it ever being like a strong over the top assist. It's fucking crazy.
Well, you know, in India they say sometimes already enlightened beings choose to come back, you know, so it's a choice. So maybe, who knows, maybe Dexter returned with a purpose to help you along, or see that in your family everything's in order. But it seems like it was a conscious choice on his part.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. And also, oh, look at him.
Amazing. That is a relaxed big fucking dog right there. I love it.
A relaxed big fucking dog. That is exactly what it is.
I have to make a screenshot for my daughter later. All right, I did that. It's very good. This is amazing.
So yeah, like, thanks so much for doing this, man. Like I say, like, this is you're kind of literally. I'll probably just like start now, and we'll just chatting, because like I think that's fine by me. Like, you're kind of the guy who made me kind of want to do this, because I was reading one of your posts a while back, and it was you were talking about like your Satnam sessions, which we'll come on to in a bit, but sorry, I think he wants to go out. For those of you who are just listening, Doug's in the room with me, and he's doesn't know what he wants to do. Apparently wants to stay. But yeah, it was kind of around your Satnam sessions, which is obviously to do with your kind of mantra work and things.
Right.
But you basically posted about how, you know, you didn't really care what people's perception of like what yoga, inverted commas, should be, whether or not like you stick to this practice, or, you know, you take bits from this and that and this and you put it all together. And that's like me, basically, like through and through. And when I read it, I was just kind of like I just felt so, I mean, obviously we've got a fairly long history. Well, obviously I haven't got a long history of knowing you, but like I think our kind of backgrounds are pretty similar.
Right.
And but when I read that, I was like, I felt such like a chiming of, I don't know, just it was kind of like, it just really rang the bell of like, yes, that's, I want to talk to you about this stuff, because it seems to me that, you know, fuck knows what yoga is these days. Like, I mean, you know, yoga's always going to be fine, but quite how it looks and what is expected of it these days, I kind of struggle with sometimes. And yeah, when I read that, I was like, I really want to chat to Rob about that, because I just think it would be really cool from someone who, you know, has been in as deep of the practice as you have been for a while, to really kind of go into it. And now, you also kind of, you know, inspired me to talk to you, because I've kind of been, the theme through a lot of these chats has been like punk rock, hardcore and stuff like that. Because obviously I grew up a punk rock kid, like a hardcore kid. And, you know, there's people like yourself and people like Raghunath, and, you know, you've kind of got this whole punk rock yoga community thing, which seem so like poles apart to people on the outside. and yet really, like, to me, like, they've always felt, you know, as soon as I got into yoga, it kind of felt like, oh yeah, this is kind of pretty fucking punk. Do you know what I mean? Like, it didn't really feel too much different. And I really wanted to then kind of discuss that with you as well a little bit, because I feel, you know, to me, it feels like people listen to my music and stuff. And, you know, I work with my local football club, Ipswich Town Football Club, you know, and I've occasionally put on some of my music when they've been like, oh yeah, you pick some music then. And I put it on, and they, you know, they're like, what the fuck is this? Like this. and you know, they're like, you're supposed to be into yoga, aren't you supposed to be into, like, you know, omming and chanting and stuff.
Right.
And yeah, so it's kind of like, it just really, like, this whole thing of like punk rock and yoga, and like, you know, the journey that you've been on from, you know, I know a little bit about your history, which I'm going to dive into with you in a minute, but, you know, from being fairly young and martial arts and stuff, through growing up as a punk kid, and then like still being that same person, but, you know, having this whole kind of spiritual background too. And, you know, for me, growing up, I kind of remember Raghunath, and I was big into Youth of Today. And then Shelter. I didn't really get the Krishna core thing to begin with, but like now it's, you know, the last 10, 15 years, it's been massive for me.
Right.
And so, you know, what came first for you really? Was it like the discipline of martial arts and then kind of the freedom of punk rock, or was it like you were a punk kid and then actually you found martial arts was like this thing to kind of train you in? And how did that lead on to yoga?
Right. Well, before we start with, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. I been following your work for quite some time now via social media, and I really appreciate everything you and your beautiful wife put out there, and your 3 dogs.
Yeah.
I think there's a great yogic family going on that I really appreciate, and that so when you asked me to jump on here and talk about exactly these things that you mentioned, it's really an honor. I'm happy to be here. As far as your question goes, for me, it was pretty atypical in a lot of ways how I dove into yoga as a journey. I started, as you mentioned, pretty early with martial arts. I started with full contact karate at the age of 7. And that was around the same time that I also discovered that certain songs on the radio made me feel a certain way. Up until 7, I was like most kids, I was into, you know, detective stories and stuff. Music hadn't really played a big part. I don't come from a musical family, nothing like that. So I listened to certain songs on the radio and noticed some of them get me going and some of them make me sad. So at the same time, movement in the form of martial arts and my lifelong passion for sound, for music, they came at the same time. And yoga came a little bit later. And like you said, it was through some of these bands that you mentioned that I, as a pretty early, maybe around 14, 15, I discovered my very first introduction to the word yoga was mantra meditation, right? Which is to this day, you mentioned the Satnam sessions, the musical project I do with my wife, Mitali. That is till this day the core of my yogic practice. Other things came along for the ride, but my very first encounter with yoga, and this is important to understand when you want to understand my story a little bit, it had nothing to do with movement at all. So it was mantra meditation that I picked up really quickly as something where I could, just like the songs when I was 7 made me feel a certain way, as a 15-year-old, amidst all the turmoil of adolescence, of a teenager, I realized with mantra meditation, I could, to some extent, calm the waves of a teenage lifestyle. And so I was hooked, and I started to read, you know, everything that I could get my hands on. And I'm very, very old. So I just turned 43. So bear in mind, this is before the internet. So I grew up in a small village in Bavaria, close to Munich. And so there was no one in our village was vegetarian. So I was the first one, right? So I checked off all the like yogic boxes, but never for years had I ever any inclination to move into the movement-based practice that now we in the West, you shouldn't, but if you would Google yoga, I don't advise it, but if you do it, then you get a very one-sided picture. You see a lot of very, fit people bending like Bavarian pretzels and stuff. And I'm not against that, but just understand that my path was completely different. So I had my movement practice, which was martial arts and running and all, movement. And then I had my yoga practice, which was reading the Bhagavad-Gita and getting into the, books like Autobiography of a Yogi, by Yogananda and all that kind of stuff. So for me, for a long time, yoga was strictly my, for the lack of a better term, my spiritual practice kind of thing, like my way to reset my nervous system. And martial arts was the movement arm of that. And so if you would have asked me with 15 years old, Robert, are you a yogi? I would have said, sure enough. And then you would have mentioned a down dog, and I wouldn't have known what that is.
Yeah.
So, and then through martial arts, and to make a very long and boring story short, I had so many neck issues through hard sparring and just years and years of getting hit in the head, basically, or kicked in the head.
So were you all karate at that point, or had you?
It was the normal progression whips that one does. It was like karate, and then taekwondo, and then kickboxing, and then it moved. It kind of swerved into exactly. So I had neck injuries, and then I realized, wait a second, I've been doing this yoga practice for like 10 years or 15 years. There is movement systems that are called yoga as well. So I started to incorporate some asanas, and kind of healed my neck injuries, got my posture straight, got into breathing. And then the whole yoga journey that started with bhakti yoga. So the yoga of devotion, where mantra, as you know, where mantra meditation is one of the biggest parts. So it morphed into a very, very high interest of other forms of yoga, Kundalini yoga that I love. But one thing, and I wanted to come back to something really interesting that you said earlier, Vips, as the introduction was going on. You said that people always, well, you didn't say that, but that's how I took it. In yoga, kind of like in music, people are so obsessed with lineages, right? People are always dividing. They're always dividing. And yoga, to me, to break it down, it means union, right?
Yeah.
That's what the word means, to yoke, to bring together. And then what happens in a scene, you divide. Okay, this is the Jivamukti dude over there, and he's suspect, and the Kundalini dude is certainly suspect, and over there is the guy from, he's a Sai Baba guy, and all that kind of stuff. So you have that in the spiritual realm, and you even have it in the movement realm. And I honestly, even as a teenager, I always understood it as a non-sectarian and an all-encompassing force, that if I could somehow awaken my own intuition, that I would benefit and others around me would benefit too. And then I started to experiment with dogma and orthodox leanings, and I grew up around more of a temple-based, more of like a, I grew up around the Hare Krishna movement and that kind of stuff. And I realized some of those things, vegetarian diet, the Bhagavad-Gita, there were a lifelong passion grew out of that. And I'll always be thankful for it. But I also chose at a young age to let certain aspects of that practice go, to make room for my very specific journey. And that's why I'm big on seeking and staying open and never committing to a certain, I'm not this or that, I'm a yogi. And I'm a musician and I'm a father. So there are certain labels you can pin on me. If you do need them, that's another thing, but that is all true. But I don't want to claim or rep for any one style, because what happens if around the next corner I make a beautiful exploration of some sort of practice that I haven't yet incorporated? Do I not do it because I'm of this or that? No, it's 2021. We have one big thing going on, and that is getting ourselves back a certain mental and physical symmetry, and both go hand in hand, as you know. So we have movement, we have meditation, we have breath work. We use what we can to reset our inner teacher, if you will. And that was always my journey. So my understanding of yoga has always been pretty tolerant, if you will. And I will never let that go, because there's too much division, as is in all parts of life anyhow. So we certainly don't need to make a practice that is about union. We certainly don't need divide and gossip and arguments there. I just don't see how this could be beneficial.
No, I've kind of always, I from my nursing background, from a fairly long standing background, sciencey type side of things has always been. And so the idea of constantly being open to there being, something which is held as like, yeah, this is fact. And then there being actually, that's not the case at all. And being able to be open to that change to me has always been like huge. And I think, when I came into yoga and things, that I've been practicing now for 15, 16 years, I guess. And it very much started as an asana thing, like really, and it was kind of strict asana, like Ashtanga, basically. And the more I practiced it, I kind of got to the stage where, for one, I felt my body breaking down. And I just, after a while, it was kind of really when I had this practice of physical asana, but also like meditation as well. And when I went and did my training over in India, all of a sudden I was doing Ashtanga 6 days a week. And I felt broken. And I was kind of, I never realized quite how much like this practice I had, which never really hurt and actually felt pretty good, all of a sudden doing it too much was just too much. And I was super fortunate. I had my teacher in India, a guy called Upendra, and now he is as close to an enlightened being as I've ever met anyone. He's just this happy, smiley, like constantly giggling, and like I love him to bits. And I went out there thinking I'm going to be all about asana. I'm going to be able to like handstand and do all pincher and all this shit. And within like 2 weeks of sitting with him, when we dive deep into kriyas and pranayamas and meditation, all of a sudden I was like, I've got not that I didn't have any interest in the physical side, but I can do loads of jazzy stuff. And I just got to the stage, it's like when I was that in depth with this guy who really knew what he was doing, and he spent the last 30 years practicing, I was just like, this is it for me. And for me, like you've kind of said about your Satnam sessions, which we'll come on to in a bit, but for me, my own practice at home, like the movement side is weird and it changes week in, week out as to rolling around on the floor, strict asana practice. It's just, how can I tune into my body, and I use different things at different times. But really, like for me, the mantra work is key. And so for me, I studied the Mandukya Upanishad when I was in India. So I kind of, Om meditation and mantra chanting for me is my go-to thing, although I do love numerous other mantra chants and work as well. You said at the beginning it was about the age of 15 through some of those bands. So was it through Shelter or any of those bands that you kind of first started hearing about, because it probably wouldn't have been probably that first, what's it called, but the one which has got
Attaining the Supreme, you mean which Shelter record?
Which Shelter album, which was, because it wouldn't have been
it was Mantra in my
Mantra.
Yeah.
I was going to say, to me it was Mantra too, because it starts off with that mantra with like the chanting, doesn't it, and then kicks into all about the Bhagavad.
Message of the Bhagavad was the song that made me a yogi completely, and you framed it very nicely. You said, was it those type of bands? And the reality is a lot more sad. It was just this one band.
Well, for me
I heard we had TV music shows back then, and one was Headbangers Ball on MTV, and so I would run home and watch Headbangers Ball, and for some reason they would have Shelter on there, which was not a heavy metal band in any way, but they were on there. And so I saw these bhakti monks kickboxing through a video and doing backflips and stuff, and the former, and by former I mean a minute ago, heavy metal village kid that I was dead. And the next minute I was like, I want to have what these guys have. They sound so, and funny enough, now me and Raghunath and Paramananda are good friends, and
amazing.
I even got asked to join the shelter reunion shows a while back, which was a really big honor. I couldn't, sadly, wasn't able to logistically wing it and do it, but they are really tremendous people. Till this day, people I respect and admire. And it was absolutely through their passion that they shared yoga. Because honestly, if I would have, I don't know how old I was, 15, something like that. And I'm really bad with numbers. Math is not my strong suit. So I was young, right? I was young in a small village. That's all you need to know. And Message of the Bhagavad came on with the chants from the Upanishads. And it was like, holy shit, I want what those guys have. And, then I found out they're also martial artists. And then I found out, okay, they're vegetarian. So my reason for going vegetarian, I would love to have a story like my daughter who's, turned vegetarian, or my wife. They both turned vegetarian as kids. My wife, Mitali, turned vegetarian, I don't know, at like 10 years old, because she said, this is not right. I'm not, and granted, her father is from India. So vegetarianism was a little bit more up for debate than for a small town village boy like myself. However, my pure reason was, well, shelter are vegetarian, so I got to be vegetarian, like that, And Raghunath and Paramananda know this, so they know that they were my introduction to yoga. But then it took on a life of its own pretty quickly. So I went to look for temples, and I went to look for, like I said, all kinds of books about yoga that I could find. If I ran into anyone who had any bit of knowledge, I would pester that person with questions. And, I would drive temple presidents insane with questions. It's like, listen. So
did you have temples in Germany that you visited, or was this like? I
had a temple in, there was a Munich Hare Krishna temple that I started going to, and started, reading a lot about the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, who has a very specific bhakti. It's called Gaudiya Vaishnavism, for someone who's interested in the more depth of that lineage. Comes back to a saint from India who is very highly respected, where my father-in-law, who was my biggest influence, who died unfortunately 2 years ago, who's actually also the real musician in our family. His name was Shankar Lal, is Mitali's father, and he's from Bengal. And the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, which Shelter at the time were part of, they based their teachings on a saint from the 1500s called Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who started the Sankirtan movement. So the singing of the holy name was kind of resurrected in India through him. So disregarding any clubs or religions and stuff, he was a very, very inspirational man. So I took to his message of mantra meditation, like we said earlier, right away. And then I started to explore, and I went to, different temples and whatever I could find, really, and kind of built my own empire of the soul, if you will, with many different things, but to start with Shelter for sure. And I'll be always very, very grateful to that mantra record, because it really turned my life upside down in the best way possible, and I never looked back.
It also was just a banging record, like such a great, like it was like some, it is, it kicks off with like, Message of the Bhagavad, and then it kind of goes into, you've kind of got, just almost straight up pop punk. It's just brilliant, and like just such positive messages throughout. Do you know what I mean? It's just amazing. So yeah, I kind of, for me it was similar. I definitely didn't go into, I remember hearing that record and not really listening to the lyrics as such type thing, just loving like the album. And then and just this, I just remember being like, Krishna core, like I don't really get that. Like how does like, because in my head at that time it's about like, I just remember some people saying like, Hare Krishnas are the kind of the crazy weird guys who walk around in yellow robes and have got their head shaved, and do you know what I mean? They're all singing, and they've all swallowed they've all had the Kool-Aid and stuff like that.
Right.
And I just remember, I don't like how is like this punk rock guy who's like been in like Youth of Today and like kind of changed music in so many ways. He's now like a Krishna guy. Like,
Yeah.
what? And then so then like later in life, all of a sudden going back to those records, I was just a bit like, whoa, like if I'd been listening to this, if I'd actually been listening, do you know what I mean? Like hearing, it would be, we're all on our journeys and we all kind of pick up when we need to. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
It's kind of, it's always, my wife and I talk about it, and there'll be stuff which happens and you don't pay any attention, and 10 years later the same thing comes around again. You just kind of like, it really hits you suddenly. Which is wonderful thing about this yoga practice, really, isn't it? Because you can repeat something a million times, whether it be mantra or whatever, and
well, at the end of the day, it's self-exploration is what it is. It's not self-realization, because let's face it, in the yoga scene, we have to be a little careful sometimes to not get ahead of ourselves. I hear people talk about enlightenment and all that kind of stuff. And while I do strongly believe there are enlightened beings, like maybe your dog Dexter, on this planet, I don't think that's our main point of concern. The yoga scene, like any scene, has a lot of drama and bullshit attached to it. And I chose at a very early age to not pay any attention to it, just like I did with division. For me, anyone that I could learn from, be it a Sikh or an atheist practitioner of asana or a temple president of the ISKCON society, they were all for me, because I always refer back to one of my favorite books of all times is the Bhagavad-Gita, right? That kind of came into my life through shelter, like all of these things at an early stage. And the Bhagavad-Gita says, equal vision, just look straight ahead. And I could really, really work with that. That really gave me a perspective of like, well, I'm neither more important nor am I less important. I'm just part and parcel of a grand scheme that I might not understand, but I want to do my part. I want to, like you said so beautifully, I want to evolve. I want to explore. And I think all we can do is, at the end of the day, represent our practice. That's it. As sometimes teachers here in Germany come to me in my classes, I'm very fortunate that they're when we're not on lockdown, there's a lot of people interested in that self-exploration process. So some people refer to my classes as the Manchester rave incarnation of a yoga class. There's a lot of like, it's not about me doing something crazy that you'll never be able to do. That's not what I'm about. However, and please don't take this the wrong way, Wibs, I'm never, ever discrediting any lineage, any part. I think Ashtanga yoga is a beautiful practice. I wouldn't choose it for myself because my body would break down eventually like yours did. So I can relate to that. But essentially, it's what you said, that we're on our own very specific. And if you think about it, not only very specific, but wonderful, unique journey. And all that we can do as teachers, as human beings, is to offer some sort of practice that worked for us and offer it as a service to others. That doesn't mean that you have to offer it for free. That doesn't mean anything. It just means you cannot and will not represent anything that you haven't experienced. And that's the problem that I have with religion. I have a great respect for all the religious texts and all the religious, essentially to me, it seems like they all start from a very common ground. And then you get into semantics, into details. And then of course, a Sikh can't hang out with a Hindu anymore because there's too many. I just don't want to celebrate differences. I want to celebrate what we all share. And what we all share is we all have a nervous system that is under attack. In these days, especially, we all have a common goal that is to hand our children a world that is still worthwhile living in. That means a yogi shouldn't have to be told that the environment is important, because yoga means union. So the environment, we're part of it, right? Yeah. So I just think that it is all about an inner process and technologies that allow us to explore ourselves. And what I want to bring onto my mat when I sit down for my daily practice is I want to use the parts and parcels that I have, like I said, breath, movement, doesn't even have to be heart movement, just movement, spine activation and stuff like that. And then I want to have set my energy straight. And that's why mantra meditation comes in, since you so kindly mentioned it. That's why that is a part of my offering, of my seva, is the mantras that made a difference in my life, in conjunction with my wife. That is part of our practice, is to sing them with people, is to record them so people can meditate to them. And so to me, it's all about seeking for a higher frequency within ourselves. And that started, with 14, 15 years old, and it has not stopped, and I will not stop. You know, until I leave this body, I will look for quality, for adventure. And if I don't recalibrate myself, energetically speaking, on my mat, then how can I expect that I am the right energy in challenging situations? I cannot. You will not have the needed smile that you need for like any challenge if you don't condition yourself to face challenges. So whatever we do on our mats, it should be with a sense of seeking exploration and with a sense of adventure. And I think you beautifully said it about your teacher in India. How do you really recognize if someone is on the right track? Because I've seen some miserable people claiming yoga, claiming meditation. I have no interest in it. I will never, ever mention names because I'm not into that. But I've seen it and it turned me off. You will see it in the smile of a person, how much joy. And that doesn't mean that they always have to be just smiling. Don't get me wrong. But it means you look in someone's eye and you see if they have a practice that works for them. And that is all they could ever teach. And that's all I would ever want to know. What works for you? And then I disregard what I can't use. And that is never meant as an insult. It's just like Bruce Lee said, use what you can and disregard what you can't. And as a martial artist, I of course have to follow Bruce Lee's advice at all times.
Everyone's got to.
So I think that's the beautiful thing about it. It's self-exploration. It's being more adventurous today than we have been a couple of years ago. And in a couple of years, if we're granted that time on this crazy planet, then hopefully we'll be even more adventurous. And I think that's the path.
It's to me, I've been reading and listening to Stephen Batchelor. I don't know if you've come across him before. He's like an English guy. So he's like the atheist Buddhist type thing.
Yes.
And to me, it was a couple of years ago I first started reading him. But to me, it was kind of a real eye opener because I know the basic tenets of Buddhism, and as everyone kind of does, I've never really dived into any real Buddhist practices outside. But for me, reading, because as you kind of alluded to, like in yoga, it can be, I love the guidance and stuff that things like the sutras give us, but if you take it all, whether people really do take it all seriously into heart, I'm not sure. When you start getting into like book 4, there starts to be getting some pretty crazy shit happening, and you can learn to like levitate and all sorts of stuff. But when listening to Stephen Batchelor talking about going back to the original text and going back to trying to trace this lineage or these true lessons which are actually written down about what perhaps the Buddha actually said, and you realize when he talks about this middle path, it's like this middle path is really what we need more than ever these days. Right. It's like this place
he doesn't talk about levitation a whole lot.
Let me tell you that.
Now,
he doesn't even talk hugely from what I've kind of read of Stephen Batchelor. There's not even masses of talk about like liberation or of, it's basically how can I be the best person within me right now? And that reminds me of what Apendra told me or told us, my first or second day, my teacher, sitting around in our little circle with him sitting in front of us in all his whites. And You know, he said, what is it to be spiritual? What is a spiritual, you know, what is being spiritual? And, you know, and people threw out ideas and whatever else. He was like, being spiritual is being as true, is being as close to your true self as you can possibly be. That is to be spiritual. And that's always stuck with me. Do you know what I mean? It's like, how, and my journey is constantly, how can I unpack all this stuff which life has put on me, you know, my experiences put on me, and which can easily drive you into this place of anxieties and stresses and whatever else. And how can I use my practice of meditation, of mantra, of asana, of, you know, walking my dogs and, you know, whatever it might be, music, punk rock, definitely. But like, how can I use those things to like unpack and like, and get closer to that inner flame, if you like, of what is me?
That's it. And you said it beautifully, brother. That's exactly it. It's about, how do I leave situations in my life a little bit better before I appeared? You know, that's how I would frame it. It's like,
I love that. Yeah.
Is our, we don't need to talk about enlightenment and all this kind of crazy shit, because at the end of the day, that's just another crutch, another can of worms that we open to not face ourselves. Essentially, I think the truth is a lot simpler, and at the same time a lot harder to do, because if you break it down, it's a mixture always. In my upcoming book, I explain it to people like this. I call it, because in Germany, all words are those words that I'm going to mention start with a D. So I call it the 3D plan. It's like a triangle. You need discipline to get anything done, right? But then you also need, if discipline is the motor that keeps us on the road going forward to becoming a person, like you said, that is more engaged, more willing to be tolerant, more strong in the most positive sense of the word. Well, if discipline is the motor, willpower, steadiness, showing up, not giving up, that is one part. But think about a person who's only thriving on these things. That person will burn out eventually, because like you mentioned so kindly, the Buddha, the middle path, it's a wonderful idea. Because, and I don't need to be Buddhist. That's what I meant earlier. By the way, it's really important. Sometimes people come to me and they are from a specific lineage. And they say, well, Robert, it's all fine and dandy what you say, but I think then I'll end up not knowing any path at all if I always kind of throw together. Well, let me put it like this. All I want is for people to feel more inner freedom through their practice. So if your practice is one person, one guru, and that's it, then that's totally fine with me. The only thing I would ask you to kindly is give me the freedom to explore my own path, like you said. And that might involve a couple more teachers, a couple of more lineages that I intertwine. So I'm a living amalgamation of a couple of different paths, right? Part of my family comes from Bengal. So the saint from my family was Sri Ramakrishna. He's an amazing saint. So if anyone who's listening to this wants a real kick out of a rebel yogi, just Google Sri Ramakrishna. He was a Bengal saint. He lived outside of Kolkata, where my father-in-law came from. And he was known for going through different sadhanas. His main thing was the goddess Kali, but he had different sadhanas. He was dressed like a Muslim for a while and did all the Muslim prayers. And then he was dressed like this. So he went through, and for me, as the seeker that I am, that kind of gives me a huge kick, like, because it's so wild and so frantic. And so, but if anyone else, like I went on a Buddhist retreat once it was the whole summer, because I wanted to learn everything about a specific Buddhist meditation. And I loved it. But it didn't make its way into my daily practice. But the funny thing is, Whips, it made its way into my life, because I remember it at the right time. And then I just go back to it. But it's not become, it didn't turn me into a Buddhist. And it has not become something that I do daily. But I always treasure what I learned in those teachings. And I have the utmost respect. And as you know, the Buddha is not just, but the Buddha is considered an avatar in India of Vishnu. So it comes back anyway. And by the way, if you look at the avatar list of Vishnu, it represents the evolution. It's basically what it is. It starts with a fish, and then you go on land, and then, so it's all interconnected anyway. And I think that it's important for people who feel like they found their one true thing. That's great.
Yeah.
But please make sure that one thing makes you laugh more, makes you more tolerant. If that one thing makes you judge other people and you lose that equal vision that we talked about, then you might consider looking into other things as well, because then you have a stick up your ass. And what we don't need is, in a world full of tense people, what we don't need is people getting tense for one more thing, and that thing is spirituality. If your spirituality or your religion or whatever you choose to do, your atheism for that matter, I know very tense atheists. They should look into letting that go. So our practice should be about letting go. And I tell you one thing, Whips, what's interesting to me is, well, I have this book coming up, right? And it's called, in German, it's called a Seeker's Code, or The Power of Seeking, because it's kind of based on what I've just, of what we're talking about, different inspirations. I don't like the word religion much, but I love the word inspiration. But then you have to kind of make it your own. How do you do that? Through self-exploration. So that's kind of the tenet of the book. But what I am in a weird situation, because I think, on the one hand, I would love it if people picked up the book and got something out of it. That's why I wrote it, right? But on the other hand, I do feel like we're so bombarded with a conditioning that always suggests we lack something in the wellness and self-care world, right? Mm-hmm. There's always like one more technique that you need to do, one more teacher training that you need to do, one more this, one more that. When in essence, we suffer from having too much thoughts. That's called psychological ailments. We suffer from too much food with not enough nutrition. That's called obesity and huge problems, diabetes and all that kind of stuff. So we suffer from too much thoughts, too much food, too much information. We suffer from too much diet plans, from too much workout methodology. We suffer from too much. So what we need, I think, is to strengthen what I call the inner teacher, or you can call it intuition or whatever the fuck you want. We need to strengthen that to start from a strong point. The martial artists will call it chi, from third chakra shit, where it's like, I feel this. Yeah. And you know what? I choose to let it go. And that is what we truly need. I think the Buddha got asked once, this is a funny story that ties in well. The Buddha got asked once by someone who wanted to challenge him. And they asked him in India back in the day, so what did you gain from all your practice and all your meditation? And the Buddha looked that person straight in the eye. So I'm guessing he had a sense of humor, which in my case makes him an even greater yogi. Totally. And he said the following, he said, I gained nothing. And the person was like, see? And then the Buddha said, well, I did lose, however, fear of death, anxiety, depression. And he went on a whole list of what he lost. And that, when I heard that many years ago, that resonated with me, because I'm all about, in my yoga, if you want to call them that, even in my sessions with people, I think it's a lot more about letting go than about gaining some complex technology that I will take 20 years, one finger handstand or something. I'm not against that stuff. It's just not what I teach. But I think what I can teach and what I do teach is that somehow each movement or each breath incorporate a new beginning and letting go. Like breathing in. You can restart a whole day with a proper inhale, and you can let shit go with an exhale, but you need to condition yourself. And so I like. I just think that it's those main principles that should be. I think it's not. Some people always ask me, like, Robert, what is the best meditation? What is the best pranayama? And you know what the answer is? Always the one you do. Yeah. That's it. I have no other answer. It might be something that I don't even know about. I'm sure you have so much technology that I could benefit from, but at the end of the day, it will always be just inspiration if you do it. If I want to change myself, I need to incorporate it and then we're talking about a practice, and that's it.
And that's what I've literally been on a call this morning for a lady. I do a lot of breath work with people for like anxiety, you know, just general sports performance, whatever else. But this lady kind of trying to, you know, improve her kind of panic disorders, for want of a better word. And, you know, she's got to go to hospital and hates hospitals and all sorts. And, you know, I was saying, you know, there's all these different techniques we can blah. And then, you know, we broke it down. We tried a few different things, and basically we found this, what, you know, I just got her to just an even in, even out breath, 3 and 3.
There you go. There you go.
You know, we were doing some other different jazzy techniques, which, you know, to put, you know, from some of my trainings and whatever, you know, in and around breath. Oh no, this is what you need to be doing with people. This is like, it was near enough pushing her. You know, I didn't even do what that was, but you know, what you should do, inverted commas, wasn't going to work for it, because it just wasn't her body wasn't there. She couldn't do it. Like, her mind wasn't there. I gave her something super simple of like, can you breathe in and out for 3 seconds each way and just relax your jaw, relax it. And you know, we finished 5 minutes of that, and I said, how do you feel? She's like, I felt like I could have gone to sleep. It felt amazing. She was like, you know,
there you go.
And you got to go, well, you know, all of these tools, they're only as good if you can actually implement them. And
that's it.
You know, doing one-handed handstands and stuff, like, if that works in your practice to center yourself, to be purely there. Like, if I try and handstand, I fucking hate handstands because I'm shit at them, and they annoy the crap out of me, and I get really frustrated. And it.
But then they're good for you, because you bring yourself in a challenging situation, and you can observe, like the Buddhists say, the witness. You can be ribs, outer body, and can be like, oh, look at me getting annoyed at the handstand again. Then it's a worthwhile part of your practice. But then all your practice shouldn't be like that, because then you kind of stop.
Yeah, exactly, 100%.
You only have practices then. So that's a beautiful example. I think that I want to give appreciation to your post of maybe today, where you said, well, not all breath work is good in all amounts. I think that ties in what you wrote so beautifully on Instagram about people overdoing pranayama. I think that goes back to what I tried to say with letting go. If you always feel like, what we need to understand as yogis is more is not better.
I know, definitely.
However, there's one thing that I found in my life that more is better, and that is mantra meditation. Because I had not yet come to a point where I'm like, no, this was enough. This is ridiculous. This mantra made me feel so good. I really shouldn't do it. but anything else, Wibs, movement. Of course you can overdo movement. I work with people all the time who come from the local CrossFit gym, and they were thrown into snatches when they hadn't done a proper push-up yet, or in yoga. I mean, let's face it, it's a taboo. No one wants to talk about it. A lot of people get hurt doing YouTube yoga, trying to get their head to somewhere. And it's all that Western conditioning. And it's in India too, of course. Like it's our human, it's like Richard Ashcroft said, it's our human condition to some extent, that we always find some sort of core truth and turn it into a threatening missile of a practice that doesn't work. Because at the end of the day, look, more pranayama is not better. You can go crazy doing pranayama. People,
I've literally had friends who have, like, I didn't write it in the post, but I've literally had friends who have, like, for want of a better word, like, blown their fuse doing like pranayamas, and, like, you know, ended up being in bad mental states because of it.
No, you should. It's the middle path.
It's the middle path, and you know, and unfortunately, you know, I like going and jumping in icy pools and stuff like that, which is all the rage these days, I know. But, like, you know, around the breath work that goes with it, you know, and I don't disagree with, like, some of Wim Hof's stuff, let's say, by any means. You know, that's all. People have been doing those practices for like 3,000 plus years, so there can't be something bad about them. But and again, maybe this is our Western mindset more than other places, perhaps. But, like, It's I want it now. I want it now. I want it now.
And
there's no
build
adaptation.
Up. No adaptation. And you know, that is the perfect example. I think Wim Hof is beautiful. And he's a yogi, by the way, a great yogi. He could do all the postures in the past, but you know what? He chose to let go what is not his current practice anymore. So I'm all, without knowing the man, I'm all for it. By the way, the Wim Hof method, without giving anything away, spoiler alert, is very simple, right?
Yeah.
It's deep breathing and kumbhak in between. Beautiful. I love it. However, I think that we tend to, as a society, it's exactly what you said. We tend to look for the shortcut and for the quick fix. And guess what? No diet, nor no breath work or movement that is not sustainable will benefit you in the end. You will end up, you know, like you said, blowing one fuse after another, be it a physical fuse, be it a mental fuse. At the end of the day, I think it's important that we sometimes remember, like you said, the Buddha's words, the middle road. Don't go crazy. Like movement. Yes, you should move daily somehow, but that could mean a walk, right?
Yes.
Or that could mean rolling around on the floor with your dog or wife or both. You know what I mean? Like
we've all been there.
Yeah, exactly. But I think we get so tense as a society, and that unfortunately goes for the yoga scene as well, because it's part of society. And really, my big awakening regarding yoga came when I was in India, because then I realized how fucking crazy India is, and in Bengal, where parts of our family are from, like I said. I went to those temples and no one gave a fuck what religion I was. They were rubbing huge Shiva lingams, old ladies rubbing this. For someone maybe who's listening who doesn't know what a Shiva lingam is, it's basically a big penis out of marble. And I was like, hell yeah, this is amazing. And you know, in that moment, it was just joy and adventure. And I'm not saying everything's better in India, don't get me wrong, it certainly isn't. However, it brought to me a yogic understanding that adventure and seeking and tolerance and being open for experience, and then always having that intuition, knowing when you're going too far, right? Like you said with the Ashtanga practice, that doesn't make Ashtanga good or bad. No. This is all just neutral. This is like someone who people always want to hear from me, like students of mine always want to hear, like, because I don't drink alcohol, for example, they want to hear that I say alcohol is bad. I will never say such a thing. I don't know your life. Maybe a glass of wine is the most beautiful part of your day. Who am I to discredit that? Yeah. I'm just saying, I want your life ideally to be so adventurous through breath, through movement, through community, through family, through connection to nature, that alcohol is certainly, if it needs to be there at all, then it's just a cherry on top, where Absolutely. You're like, you know what, I'm going to treat myself. I'm not going to do it. You can. And the thing is this, I want people to lose that tension that ruins everything, because we've seen the most beautiful practices go horribly awry through tension, through division, through, you know, and then if you don't, I just don't see how tension in 2021 serves us. And that's why my big thing is, at the moment, use meditation if you want, but always observe that it makes you less tense. Because if it makes you more tense, then we have a problem and we may adjust. And I, for example, sometimes think we get so far ahead of ourselves with all our, you know, biohacking and all that bullshit, where it's like, you know what? Learn how to sit first. Don't even think about meditation. Meditation has an agenda, right? You want to be pointed with your thoughts, or transcend the thoughts. But why don't we start with go out into nature, find a nice pond or tree, and just sit. No meditation, no nothing, but please don't look at your phone. Sit with yourself or listen to a song all the way through. Like, we need to start. People talk about enlightenment, but they can't be without their phone for a minute. There's a disconnect there. We just need to start building up to the proper strength that then certain techniques require. And that's cool. But I think, like you rightfully said, we need to be a bit more realistic what we're dealing with here in the year 2021, because in a time where mental instability is the #1 cause for people to suffer, I don't think enlightenment is our topic. I think our topic is resetting our nervous system. Our topic is presence. Our topic is mental strength. And I think we should keep it real. And if the punk rock yogis can't keep it real, who can, right?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's like on that like punk rock idea, I guess, like, you know, you've spent, for those of you who don't know, so Robert's, I don't know, you must hang on. It was around 2005. Did you join Boysetsfire in 2005-ish?
Yeah, it was earlier even. Yeah, but it was 2003.
Okay. I know that Plague Years came out in 2006, didn't it? But so I've kind of known Robert since like 2003, 4-ish, I guess, from having been to see the band that he plays in, Boysetsfire, play. I don't know, your Boysetsfire, apart from AFI, are probably the most watched band I've seen. I think probably 12 or 13, 14 times, I reckon, I've seen Boysetsfire. But, you know, you've kind of been in this hardcore punk scene. Now, being in a group with, like, obviously all the rest of those guys, like, I remember a while back, sort of Nathan's obviously been putting his life back together a little bit over the last few years. And it kind of all kicked off with him kind of saying, shit, I need to get into some kind of shape. Like, he'd kind of put on bunch of weight, and, you know, he was dealing with all of his kind of demons and stuff. Now, I remember seeing him and you like working out together, and he was doing some meditations and some asana and stuff with you. So when you were in that kind of, even before that point, I guess, but like, how did the rest of like this, like, I mean, they're all pretty, I don't know them, I've met them a few times and stuff, but, you know, kind of punk rock guys kind of take to the yoga side. And, you know, did you have like your practice of like mantra chanting, like on the bus and stuff like that?
Always. Yeah.
Cool.
That's funny that you ask, because Boysetsfire is, in the best sense, a very, very dynamic and oftentimes dysfunctional but loving family, right? So for people to understand, our band is more like brothers than it is work acquaintances, right? So we lived together, we came up together. I joined, like you said, after the band had been in existence for a while, but I had been so close with them years before. I worked as a roadie for them, and I toured the world with them. So it was not a coincidence that I ended up joining. I was already they hijacked me already, in a sense. Yeah. And and it's been always interesting, because even though I too had, and this is long ago, I had times where I experimented with, you know, alcohol and certain other things, as you do as a young, you know, basically a young adolescent coming up in a rock group touring the world. I quickly noticed that it kind of challenged my inner mental and physical symmetry. So it kind of brought me right back to the practices I've been doing all along. So yes, to answer your question, I am the one who's in bed right after the show is done when we tour. And since it's brotherly love, not only can I do all of that, but it's great fun, right? We laugh about this. Like our guitarist Chad and me, we're super close, but he goes to bed around the time that I get up when we're on tour, right? So he loves to drink, carry on, and they have bus parties, but we have certain boundaries where it's like, hey, oh, there's incense, oh, Robert's going to bed, like, and they're very like, always being very accepting all along. And it would literally be, you know, me sitting in a corner doing weird breath work, like for real, and they would just be sitting over there, and it was always unity in diversity. And that's what made Boysetsfire, I think, such an interesting unit, because we are all so different. With Nathan, it was especially different because he really kind of lost his way for a bit there, and got into, you know, mental and physical trouble, as you said. And it was amazing to see how he used movement, and then a certain body work practice led to more breathing awareness. And then the more breathing awareness brought him to meditation. And now we're at the point where he's texting me, Robert, I just read about the Trimurti, the Indian threefold divinity. And he's like, that is amazing. And so now we go back and forth, even on psychology, even on Indian philosophy and stuff like
amazing.
that. So it's kind of nice to see how it's not that he's, and we laugh about it too, of course, because he's like, oh, this stuff is interesting. I maybe should have listened when you told me about it 15 years ago.
15
right?
years ago, yeah.
But to be fair, everyone is on their unique path. I'm just glad
exactly
my brother
said,
is doing better, and I think he found the right tools. And I'm just doing me. Like when I tour, there's not one bit of difference to when I'm here with my family. Like I said, for me, being a yogi is not a conscious choice. And talk about cultural appropriation. I love India. It's just my thing.
I was going to bring
right?
that. I wanted to bring that up a little bit because there's definitely, especially with the Kundalini side of things. I've read and heard so many people like discussing and saying it almost shouldn't be done. It's complete cultural appropriation to be doing kind of Kundalini and all of the mantras and all of like the
because
that
it
side
comes
of things.
because it comes from, for people who are listening, a lot of the Kundalini practices and the practices from the Sikh religion are the same. So the mantras that are used are partly the same. And you know what, Ribs, that brings me back to earlier when I said that my interest in yoga was non-sectarian and not infused by a religious searching. Because you got to think, I grew up in a small town, like I said, and I came up as a, altar boy in a Catholic church. So by the time I was 10, I already was done with religion. I saw how those priests behaved, and not that anything bad happened to me, but it didn't inspire me. And that got only reignited by Shelter, who had found a for them fitting spiritual practice that obviously infused and injected their life with passion and with a sense of adventure. So I was kind of done with religion, and I kind of still am. I always just look for inspiration, like I said. And for me, I never looked at it as like, I want to become a Sikh. I play in a band that's called the Satnam Sessions. I am aware of the Gurmukhi mantras having, coming from a place in India, in northern India called the Punjab. And I'm aware when I, chant the Hare Krishna mantra, where it comes from. I respect those lineages equally, but I never felt I had to make a choice. And I think to say, well, you shouldn't be doing, let's say Kundalini yoga because some of the mantras there are, I think that's taking it a little too far, because if you do respect where something comes from and you use it for your own higher frequency and you use it with respect, then I think it's not appropriation. It's just using technologies that for some karmic reasons respond with you, right?
Yeah.
And so I never have a problem mixing mantra styles. I love Sanskrit. I love Gurmukhi. My wife is a Kundalini teacher, but she's also half Indian. So what is she supposed to do? She's neither Indian nor German. She's both. Her mother is German as they come, and her father was a tabla master from Bengal. So, admittedly, her inner response was to a part of India that her family is not from, So she grew up, her father grew up obviously in Kolkata, where they have Sanskrit, they're Brahmins, there's a Brahmin family. But Mitali resonated the most with Gurmukhi mantras from another part of India. So I can never understand why. And you know what, Lips, at the end of the day, people who would say something like that are usually people who kind of want to stir up shit anyhow. And that speaks of a low frequency. So I feel sorry for them, especially keyboard warriors, who
Yeah.
have some, because essentially the reality is, if you are putting yourself out there and you are sharing your experiences, your inner experiences, your practice, well, someone's bound to be offended at this point in time, right? So, I mean, who cares? Look at, if George Harrison would be alive right now,
I know.
people would be like, you are not from India. What are you doing? You know what I mean? But I'm glad he did everything he did. He showed only appreciation. And you know who wasn't offended? Ravi Shankar wasn't offended.
No.
Srila Prabhupada wasn't offended. It's always people who have a low frequency who try to stir up shit. Now, if someone would make fun of something, if someone would use a technology in a degrading way, of course, then we have a problem, right?
Yeah.
These mantras are holy for people, but I just don't understand why I can't use them because I'm in a German body. That makes no sense to me. Essentially, as when we talk about yoga, one of the first principles in yoga is I'm not this body. I'm a spirit soul. That's it. So that is the first thing you learn. The first thing is you're not this body. The second thing is you're not even your mind. And the third thing is you're not your emotions either. And if you accept these three tenets of yoga, well, then we shouldn't have a problem, because this is just a German vehicle that I'm driving right now. And as we know, German vehicles are kind of good. So that's all good. But
as a Brit, I probably can't say anything about that because our vehicles are terrible. So,
but I think that the whole cultural appropriation discussion, or what parts of yoga you can use or can't use, or what lineages you can mix or can't mix, I'll tell you right now, I can do whatever the fuck I want, because if it makes me feel good, I'll use that technology. And you know what? Founders of religions were also not just coming up with shit. That was also already part of their DNA, in culturally speaking. So, I just, Buddhism has its roots in Hinduism. A division of Buddhists and Hindus makes no sense, or Sikhism is kind of like almost a mixture of like Muslim thought and then Hindu thought, because it's on the border there. And so
and when you look at the conflicts up there, it's absolutely crazy, isn't it? Like, you think of all of the conflicts up there. I mean, I traveled through like Amritsar and like parts of Rajasthan up towards, the borders and things. And it's, you go down to the border between India and Pakistan, and you've kind of got, the big show off every night where they kind of meet at the border and they do their big stamping, and you kind of go, well, this is kind of fun, but like, this is kind of serious too. And really, like, look, the thing that always got me was you've managed to put together this show where you do the same thing every night, and it's properly choreographed. And you're like, you guys have managed to do that. Like, why can't you just do that in the other spheres? Do you know what I mean? Like, you're clearly not that different, because you're happy to like dance together every night. You're dancing with guns and you're marching and doing excessive stuff, but you're not that different. Do you know what I mean? Like, between the Sikhs and the Muslims and stuff, they're all from the same, base and sort of ground.
And that's why spirituality, I think, that's why I'm so disinterested in all the dogma that certain philosophies bring, or the details or ideologies, because it doesn't serve a purpose in my life. And even when people are negative in response to something anyone does, I think it says a lot more about the people who are negative. It shows that they still have room to improve, to get more well-being and more true well-being, which I think, like we said, with laughter or tolerance or being at ease with yourself, I think that's the true qualities we are seeking. And if yoga offers technologies that bring you closer to true inner well-being, then I think that should be free. Then that should be for anyone, right?
Absolutely.
And it shouldn't be restricted to a certain religion and to a certain group of people, a certain color of skin, certainly not a certain gender. No. And so it's not a big deal, to be honest, for me, because I just don't pay a lot of attention to all that stuff and all those discussions. And I have love for all the mentioned philosophies, all the mentioned lineages, but I don't need to claim one. You know, I just use what works for me and try to be the happiest and most adventurous incarnation that I can be. And that's it.
Perfect. Yeah. Well, I think that kind of probably is a fairly good place to round off and finish, because it's just, you know, that's what we're looking for, really, isn't it? Just more adventurous, more rounded, closer to yourself, and whatever you need to do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Whatever tools are available to you, like, grab them, use them, take what you can, leave what you can't.
That's it. And it's not about who's a yogi, who's not. I just read a great biography by Willie Nelson, the great country singer. And he says a lot of things that resonated deeply with me. Now, can I not take the advice or the inspiration of a 90-year-old country singer because he is from, you know, Texas? I'm not from Texas. So it's just regional differences, and you can find truth anywhere if you're open to it. And you can find teachers anywhere if you're open enough. And that's why, to bring all of what we talked about full circle, that's why I do believe that we are seekers, and seekers of truth are a lot more adventurous and a lot more fulfilled than finders of truth. Because the problem with finding truth is that almost immediately you start to defend your truth, and you start to discredit someone else's truth. So I'm really happy to stay a seeker until I leave this German body, and hopefully reincarnate as one of your dogs. And I think it's really,
oh no, it's
you're doing the yoga scene in general, and especially where you're from in the UK, a great service by keeping an open mind, by speaking your mind, and by raising questions, and by just trying to be of service. That's because essentially all we do is try to uplift our inner frequency. Why? So we have a better experience, however life unfolds. We know there will be ups and downs, and who didn't know knows now due to a pandemic. So we need to work on that inner strength, but essentially it's not about us. It's about uplifting, like I said earlier, leaving situations, leaving conversations, leaving exchange with other people a little bit better than, you know, before you got involved. And I think that's the main task of our times, because from a yogic standpoint, we live in Kali Yuga, the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. And you don't need to be a yogi to believe that. You just need to open a newspaper.
Yeah, 100%.
When I was younger, Whips, it didn't make so much sense to me when I read in those Indian texts, like, okay, this is the age of quarrel and hypocrisy. But I kind of liked my life. You know what I mean? I was like, it's not so bad. What's wrong with this? And now in the year 21, you need to just open a newspaper in Britain or here, and you see it. You see the quarrel, you see the division, you see the mental ailments, and you see how people suffer their own thoughts and their own barriers and their own inner boundaries. And I think if yoga can bring anything to the table, it's really a technology to, on a physical plane, on a mental plane, and on an emotional plane, learning and relearning how to let go of everything that brings us tension, like anger, like greed, like all these things that we would be so much better off without. And for the rest, it's exactly like you said. It's just about being a hopefully decent person, loving person. And no one who's ever commented negatively on the internet or anything like that feels happy inside. no one who writes as a comment, you know, be it for a yoga teacher, a martial artist, a classical musician, it doesn't matter. If that is your energetic output to put other people down, to feel good for yourself, then we have an energetic problem. And I just wish people more inner fulfillment. That's it.
Love it. Yeah, I don't think there's anything else to say. I think that's such a nice round off to it. I kind of can't just help but wish others more fulfillment. Well, I can't say thanks enough, but honestly, it's been an absolute pleasure, mate. Like I say, you were pretty much the reason I wanted to start a podcast, because I wanted to chat to you about this stuff. So the fact I've managed to do it so early on has been amazing. I'm not entirely sure.
We'll do it again, Wibs. It was,
yeah, man, that'd be
such
amazing.
It was such a pleasure
awesome.
talking to you. Thank you for your kind words, and thank you for your interest and everything you do. Also, please unknowingly pass on my appreciation to your wife.
Of course, I will. Same to your wife.
Thank you very much. And yeah, please
and before
keep
we
in
go,
touch.
Yes, just briefly, if people want to know more about you, because I know you've got this book coming out, but
Yes.
it's going to be in German to begin with, isn't
Yes.
it? Now, I did hit you up on Instagram and say, I want a copy, but I don't speak
Yeah.
German. So
no, we're starting our English programs. We've been in somewhat of a transition phase, because the book took a little bit of work, because we wanted to put it out really quickly. It's, as you said, it's coming out in German first, because that's how it was written. It's coming out in March, and hopefully it will be followed by an English version sometime later this year. But we're also about to start English programs. I have a Bhagavad-Gita seminar that is also happening this month. It's an introduction to the Bhagavad-Gita for yoga teachers or people who are just interested. And we're going to do that in German first, and then in English as well.
Perfect.
And if someone's interested, you can find me, for example, on Instagram, Robert Ehrenbrand, EHRENBRAND. And all the posts there are in German and English as well. So I don't want to exclude anyone. So, you know, whoever's interested, if anyone listening to this has further questions, hit me up on Instagram or Facebook or what have you. And yeah, that's where you find me.
I'll put all the links and thing. I'll put the Satnam sessions on there as well.
Amazing. Thank you.
That'd be, you know, I'm sure there'll be many people who'd be interested in that as well. So yeah, and then obviously as soon as I know more and it comes out, we'll do another one about the book when the book comes into English. We can do another chat and kind of just chat solely about that.
Amazing.
Awesome. Right, mate. I'm gonna end this now. And yeah, again, thank you so much, and we'll catch up soon.
All right, Wibs. Was great talking to
fella.
you. Have a good day, man. Thank you.
Cheers, fella. Take it easy.
Bye.